Welcome to 101 Ways to Market Your Language program. This is webinar 2 of a total of 10 webinars on marketing for language and literacy programs. I just put language programs up there. Many of the principles and strategies and tactics that we'll talk about are applicable as much to literacy, community-based education programs as they are to language programs housed either in large institutions or private language schools. And I think we have a pretty big cross-section of different people here. So welcome today. Glad you're here. And if you haven't already, introduce yourself in the chat box at the lower right-hand side. Please feel free to say hello to everybody. We've got people joining us in today from Canada, from the US, and from London, England. So I'm thrilled that you're all here. And for those of you, again, who are just joining us, the program's being recorded. The recordings are going to be made publicly available on my blog and on YouTube to other people who aren't able to be here with us today. I got a few emails from people last week saying that they caught the program afterwards. So just so you know that including the chat is also captured and others will be able to see it later on. And I'll encourage you again to go ahead and use the chat box to oh, in Israel, I have another person from Israel. That's fabulous. Thanks, Frida, for letting us know. I'll encourage you to use the chat box to offer your thoughts, your responses, your own experiences, your stories, and your questions. I'd love for this to be an interactive dialogue. And we're going to get started right away here. These programs are pretty quick. They're pretty zippy. I'm trying to keep them to about 30 minutes and maybe 30 to 60 minutes, but try and really make them really content oriented. Week 1, for those of you who are here, you will remember that we talked a little bit about marketing strategies and plans. And if you weren't here, then you can, if you wish, watch it on YouTube or on the blog if you haven't already. It was basically a broad overview, and there were some tools that I gave away at the end in terms of templates. Every single week I'm going to give away some templates or worksheets or things that you can take back and use with your staff at your organization as a point of departure for deepening the work that we do in the webinars, and also you know, kind of giving you some really easy, simple tools and frameworks to help you as you build your marketing plans. Today is all about setting goals, target markets, and budgets. I don't know how we're going to do all that in 30 minutes, but we're going to give it a try. We're going to give you a little bit of a taste of it. And everything that I do, as well as is focused specifically on language programs and literacy programs. My background is that I've worked in marketing for both of those sectors, and I've written a book on it, 101 Ways to Market Your Language Program. And then I later deepened my understanding of marketing specifically for those sectors by talking about it in my PhD research, where I interviewed program directors and asked them what they struggled with in terms of marketing and promotions and what made the most sense for them. I just realized that I haven't started my webcam, so I'm going to start it and say hello. Hello, there's me. And there's the book that many of these ideas are based on. It's 101 Ways to Market Your Language program. But you don't have to get the book if you don't already have it, because we talk about many of the concepts and principles and strategies. And honestly, I wrote the book in 2005, and social media has kind of changed everything since then. So that was kind of the point of departure for the work that I've been doing since then. So the first edition was out 10 years ago. So this is kind of 10 years of wisdom. Next week, we're going to talk about focusing on the benefits, what's in it for the student, writing and framing some of the materials that you have for marketing, and what language to use and that sort of thing. Give you some sort of copywriting and ad writing strategies. And then in week number 4, we talk about some of the physical aspects of marketing tools, like your brochures, your business cards, signage, and email. It's a class on communications designed for marketing. And for those of you in Canada and the US, I have a couple of companies that I found that offer really inexpensive business cards, and I'll share some of those with you. I don't have any affiliation with them, and I don't make any money from referring people to them. I just think that they offer really good services. Week 5, we talk about reaching your audience and connecting with them on an emotional level, and what makes your students care about you and the other people who are paying the bills, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. Now, week number 6, we're specializing in institutional programs, so programs at universities and that are part of school boards, and because they face some kind of special challenges in terms of navigating the complexities of organizational bureaucracies, and I've had some experience with that, so we kind of give them some tips for navigating those rocky waters. Number 7 is all about the power of connection. And week number 8 is reaching, again, it's about reaching the audience on an emotional level. And we'll talk about some practical strategies to do that. Number 9 is a piece that so many people miss in their marketing, and it's the idea of effective follow-up. And how do you, in that rush of getting things marketed, your program promoted, and you've got your price set, you've done all your background work, you've got your programs built, you've set your price, you've done your promotion, and then that's the time when many marketing programs fall apart. And there are some, kind of strategies that you can follow in order to keep the momentum going throughout the year, and so that you're not always in that kind of having to catch up or that kind of up and down that happens with so many marketing programs, but to kind of keep it on an even keel and determine what needs to be done throughout the year in order to keep your promotional activities effective. And then in week 10, we'll talk about one of the things that I didn't talk about in my book, which was social media for marketing and how that works, and how I really don't believe that social media does any good in terms of sales, but it can be effective in terms of marketing. So we'll talk a little bit about the differences between that. Today is all about setting marketing goals, target markets, and budgets. Those are our main topics for today. We touched on this a little bit last week, the idea of setting marketing goals. How many of you, just maybe let me know in the chat box if you've used this very acronym with your students to set the SMART goals, right? The idea of having specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and I put timelined or time-oriented goals there. And we'll talk a little bit about what this means for marketing and how to kind of consider the capacity that you have in your organization with regards to setting marketing goals. I've heard some absolute horror stories from colleagues, and I told this one last week as well, that I had a colleague at a large institution whose dean told her that her ESL program would be shut down the following semester if she didn't double her enrollment. And the idea of doubling enrollment in any program in one semester is pretty ludicrous. I don't care how much capacity you have. And so she was looking at, well, how do I save my program? We start by kind of go back and talk about those ideas of setting goals, and she went back and negotiated with her dean for more time because the deadline she was given and the goal she was given to her was neither realistic and nor was it achievable in a given period of time. And I've got some specific ideas and examples for marketing and how this can work for you. In terms of a specific goal, is anybody using social media to market their programs right now? Maybe let me know in the chat box if you are using things like Twitter and Facebook to promote your programs, or if that even applies to your program at all. Great. Cindy uses Facebook. Good. I know that there's still some kind of concerns and questions as to how social media can be used for effective marketing, particularly with reaching certain barriered clients. For those who work in literacy, it may or may not be an effective tool. And though I love social media myself, I don't think it works for everybody all the time, particularly with literacy programs. For example, though, if you wanted to set a specific goal for marketing, you could say something like, we're going to set up a Twitter account and we're going to use it to engage with our current and prospective students. And the idea of connecting with people on a regular basis to do that. Okay, so you've identified your distribution channel, if you will. That's one of the words that we use in marketing. So last week we talked about the 5 P's of marketing, right? You need to have your product developed. You need to be able to set a price for it. You need the place, which is 2 different things. One is the place where you offer your classes. So it can be a physical space or it can be an online space. It's also the distribution channels for your products. So how you sell them, if you use agents or if you market online or brochures in your local community and that kind of thing. Then we talk about the promotion piece, and for many people, they think only of promotion when they think of marketing and don't also consider the product, the pricing, the place, the promotion we know, and the 5th one is partnerships. So again, if you're new to marketing, you want to familiarize yourself with what they used to call them the 4 P's of marketing, and now they're talking about the 5 P's of marketing, with that 5th one being very important for 21st century promotion and marketing overall, which is the partnership piece. Okay. And the idea that the goals will encompass all 5 of those, and we'll consider your price. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how to price programs today. And the idea of making marketing goals super, super specific. My work that I've done with particularly small language programs, the smaller the program, the more difficulty it seems having specific goals. And the ideas of, well, we could do this, or we should do that, somebody should do this, or, well, you know, yeah, we could do X, Y, and Z. Those to me are words that kill a really effective marketing strategy. It's not about what you could do, it's about what you can do in terms of specific actions and your capacity. So if you, avoid those words, we could do this or we should do that. And they're focusing instead on very specific, manageable tasks that you can accomplish in a given period of time. And one of the aspects of marketing that I've observed with the nonprofit and even supposedly revenue generating programs is a lack of understanding how to measure the results of marketing. So it can be very tricky, right? You know, business people measure the results of their sales. Sales and marketing are different things. So in educational programs, sales mean registration, or they mean, you know, the slang that we use in the sector is the bums in seats. And how many bums do we have in our seats, and our classrooms full, our programs full? And that would be the equivalent of measuring sales in a business perspective. And marketing can drive sales, but marketing is its own activity unto itself. It's more difficult to measure because it's often effective marketing is based on good relationships. And then how do you measure or quantify relationships? In terms of marketing and tracking your marketing for a language program or a literacy program, it would be, for example, points of contact. So how many people are we engaging with on social media? It's not just one of the things I'll teach in a Twitter program that I do. It's not how many Twitter followers you have. It's how many engaged Twitter contacts that you have kind of going back and forth, and do you have the ability to kind of, you know, tweet something, ask a question, and get a response, and have the back and forth with people. You can buy Twitter followers, you can buy Facebook fan followers, and it's meaningless. Things in terms of tracking, things like how many phone calls does our organization get every week about our programs. So whoever's working the front lines at your organization, you can have the person track. Is anybody doing that now, by the way? I should ask you. Things like tracking the number of phone calls that you get or the number of emails, and whoever is addressing the emails for the organization. You know, daily toll, you know, at the end of 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, whenever they're getting ready to wrap up, have a little notebook on the side with, today I got 3 program inquiries, or I got 10 program inquiries, and track that over a period of, I would say, at least a year, and say once a week, tally it all up, and how many did we get? You may be able to identify which days of the week you're getting more inquiries. It may be that Monday mornings are a hot time for your program, and you may be able to see how many inquiries you're getting about your program. Wow. Okay, Gareth has 45 people in his circles, but he's not teaching yet. Wonderful. Super, and Renata does track the number of emails. Fantastic. That will give you an idea of how many people are you reaching in your community, whether your community is a local community or whether it's a global community. And if you have a big emphasis on a local program, how many people come through your doors in a week and ask questions about your programs? All of those kind of tracking and measuring are valid ways of tracking your marketing activities. Over time, you could also align with, okay, so if we get 100 emails, for every 100 emails we get, maybe we get 1 registration. And that's not to say you're doing a bad job because 99 people don't register in your program. It does give you an idea of where you stand. But if you don't have a baseline, then you don't have an idea where to improve. Can be for some programs that the walk-ins from the street are more numerous than the emails, and finding out what really does work for you, particularly in nonprofit programs. I think typical or traditional sales marketing or business marketing principles don't apply, or not necessarily in a way that makes sense to us, because, you know, we work with fewer resources and have different metrics that we work with. Okay. In terms of if you use social media for Twitter, for example, it wouldn't be the number of followers that would matter, but the number of conversations that you could engage in with prospective students or current students using Twitter. So, you know, somebody said they have a Facebook group. Cindy said that they use Facebook. How many people are engaging or liking what you're doing or leaving comments on your page? That's more important than the number of posts that you're putting out. There may be some relationship between the number of posts you put up and the number of likes you get back, but what triggers the people that you're working with and what kind of catches their attention and engages them emotionally? Ultimately, you want to have the emotional engagement piece, and I don't mean that in any kind of you know, like mind-bending way, but if people aren't really invested or they're not interested, then it doesn't really help the marketing efforts. You can do all the marketing you want, but if people aren't responding, it's ineffective marketing. So what is working in terms of getting the conversation going? And I think for nonprofit and educational programs, it's important to talk about, you know, having conversations with students and dialoguing with students, because we know that as teachers, what we ultimately want is to make a difference in their lives. Even though our funders may want, you know, bums in seats, and if we don't have enough students, the program closes down. Having enough students in the seats is kind of a byproduct of establishing a program where students know that you care about them. Because when we do that, we know that they then tell other people that they have a high level of trust with the program, and increasing levels of trust is really important in marketing. So all of that actually does matter for educational marketing. And it's one of the pieces that I struggled with for many years because I was required to have my programs full. But at the same time, I struggled because that seemed to be a values conflict for me, because what I really believed in was you know, personal growth and learning and lifelong learning, language learning, building skills. And that for me seemed like a values disconnect between just having warm bodies in a classroom for my numbers. When I got to the point where I thought, you know what? Numbers are a byproduct, and if I don't care, then I won't have my numbers. That for me was an amazing realization, because it let me kind of calm down and relax and be true to who I was professionally and personally, and go back to doing what felt right, which was caring about my students. And I still deeply care about my students. The more I focused on that, the better the marketing became, which was, it sounds very counterintuitive, but it really, really did work. Having said that, we still need to measure things, but we need to measure the right things. And when we're looking at what are the right things, engaging with people in conversations that matter are the right things. When we talk about measuring, particularly in programs that are driven by funding, or if you're using social media, right? One of the most difficult aspects to counter is this seduction to engage with what I call vanity metrics. And I first heard about this term by reading a book called The Lean Startup. And if you haven't read it, I'm going to write the author's name here, because I think it's a really interesting book. Not just Eric Rios is the author. It's called The Lean Startup, and he talks about startup technology companies. But in so many ways, I think literacy organizations and language schools are often in this startup phase, right? Because you're always under the constant threat of closing if you don't have sufficient enrollment. So I found some real parallels between what he was talking about with technology companies and literacy and language organizations. So if you do pick up the book, has anybody read it, by the way? I should ask you now. It's a pretty quick read. It's great if you're traveling on a plane or something. And I would encourage you to pick it up. It was supposedly one of the best business books of 2011. I'm not sure who decided it was the best. But one of the things that I pulled from this was this idea of vanity metrics. So for example, on Twitter, how many Twitter followers do you have? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Because, you know, if I look at people's Twitter accounts now and they have 100,000 followers, my first thought is, did you pay for them? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, I don't know. But the idea of we need to measure the right things and what matters. It's very valuable in a literacy organization, I think, in a language organization, to sit down and have those conversations with your staff, your leadership team, your managers, your administrators, and ask the question, what ultimately matters? And I think the way you get down to that is saying, if we had enough money and we didn't have to worry about marketing, what would we focus on in our work? And when the question is, when you take money off the table, what remains? If what remains is making a difference or changing people's lives, giving them the tools they need to have a life that they envision, then that's actually what you need to focus on. And through that, we get to the marketing. And so the idea of avoiding irrelevant measurements is I think an important aspect of marketing, because it doesn't give you a true sense. It's disingenuous and doesn't give you a true sense of actually how your marketing is progressing, how the organization's growing, not if your values are rooted in making a difference. If we use the SMART model formula again for setting marketing goals, and we can look at what is achievable, and this is in terms of capacity in organizations, this is a piece that many organizations will struggle with, because you think, okay, well, what can we realistically do? If you think back to the specific goals, right? Well, we could do this, we should do that. Well, somebody said, this is a good idea. Often what's lacking in an organization is the capacity. So when you set the specific goals about, we will open a Twitter account and use it for a year, for example. One of the things we talked about last week was not quitting too soon. But what's realistically achievable for your staff right now? So it's all well and good to say, oh, we'll have a Facebook page. If in your current staff right now, technology or social media knowledge is fairly low, maybe having a Facebook page isn't the right thing for your organization if you don't have the social media capacity to maintain it on a regular basis. And having conversations around what are you actually able to achieve, and keeping it small. When it comes to marketing, I have found over the years, and having worked with schools in Canada and the US and Sweden and wherever else I've worked with them now, that setting achievable goals that you can kind of tick off, yeah, we did that, is super important, because it keeps it manageable and also helps to build the marketing knowledge of the people who work in the organization. And when I've seen language program managers either have unrealistic expectations imposed upon them by senior leadership, or they kind of get caught up in this idea, well, we have to do this, and we've got so much to do, it becomes unproductive. It gets to the point where it's unproductive. And I've been through that myself in my own programs, where I've had to, as I said, get a certain number of students in my programs, where I was given mandates to do it. I did it, but the price for me was quite high in terms of stress and constantly feeling like I was a hamster on a wheel and not getting the things done that I needed to get done, and keeping the goals achievable, I think, is very important. Okay. So as you're going through today's program, I'm hoping you'll share with us kind of your thoughts about what might happen. Are you identifying with any of the things that I'm talking about in terms of what I've seen in my own work and what I've experienced in terms of unrealistic expectations? Has it happened to you at any point? How is this resonating with you? In addition to the goals being achievable, they need to be realistic. So, can we do it within a given period of time? And, for example, for Twitter, if you say, okay, well, we're going to get 2 people from the organization to tweet on a regular basis, and spreading things out a little bit. You may think that's not a very lofty goal in terms of marketing, and how will that help us increase our registrations? And starting with kind of the small little chunks of goals is ultimately effective over time, because marketing isn't something that you can do in a short period of time, right? Remember from last week we talked about one of the things that I did find in my PhD research was, for language programs in particular, and the time from creating a new program to getting it to a point where it's it's viable in terms of the number of students, can take from anywhere between 2 and 5 years. That for me was a huge eye-opener, because a situation that I had worked in before, the timelines that we had been given to determine the success of a program was always much shorter, often 1 semester or maximum 2 semesters, and then it's out of the calendar because it's not making any money, or it's not, there's no market for it. When in reality, we just haven't given it enough time to get traction in the market. And that timeline is much, much slower in education than it is in many other, I hate to call education an industry or even compare it to an industry, but say sectors, right? The time it takes to get a program off the ground, not only in terms of developing it, but marketing it and getting enough students and gaining the momentum to continue it, can be a very long turnaround time. Oh, okay, I'm so glad, Pam. Thank you very much. Yeah, like I say, it was an eye-opener for me, because I remembered looking back on the programs that I had worked in and thinking, well, we canceled this, or there's obviously not enough interest in that. I don't know if it's ever happened to you before, but the minute you cancel the program, you're getting phone calls from people the next week saying, oh, what's that program? We saw it in the calendar and it's not there anymore. And then you had to tell them it's off the books before it even got off the ground. And so, you know, the idea of what can you do in building a program that will work for you over time. For a marketing strategy, I think it's always wise to build a strategy for at least a year, possibly even 2 to 5, right? If we know that's the sales cycle, to use that business language, of courses, particularly in language and literacy, what will work for you over time. And then not trying to accomplish too much in a short period of time. And the book that I talked about last week, the Guerrilla Marketing for Nonprofits, if you haven't picked this up, I would encourage you to do it. I'm going to write it here in the chat box. See if I can write it correctly here without misspelling it. Levinson, Adkins, and Chris Forbes are the authors of it. J. Conrad Levinson is kind of the grandfather of guerrilla marketing, if you will. He wrote books in the 80s and 90s, but always focused on business, and partnered with his son-in-law, Frank Adkins, and then Chris Forbes, who I had the chance to interview last week in a webinar, and he talked about marketing. He does a lot of marketing with faith-based organizations and churches in the US, and what you can pull from a business perspective and what doesn't work because it doesn't feel right. And the idea of not giving up too soon, right? So they need to be realistic. And in terms of timeline, what time do we attach to these marketing goals? So for example, if you were going to use Twitter or Facebook, saying we'll post twice a week, and commit to that, and then track it, and track the conversations that may emerge as a result of it. So somebody said that they were using Facebook, for example. Committing to posting on a regular basis. Consistency is one of the key things in marketing. Doing it consistently and not giving up too soon, and not giving up when you get busy is a super important part of marketing. Okay, thanks, Donna, for letting us know you had to step out. Really appreciate that. And the idea of building consistent marketing over time is very, very effective. And so when we have this ebb and flow of crazy times, particularly nonprofit, and then you feel, oh, I don't have time to do any tweeting this week or any Facebook, being able to use third-party tools like, say, TweetDeck or Hootsuite. We'll talk a little bit more about those in week 10 and how to use those to present a consistent message. I think in 101 Ways, back when I did it back in the day, I looked to business models for advertising and tried to use that to inform the practices that I was learning about marketing for nonprofit and language education. And now they're saying that because of all of the noise that's out there, consumers, if we think of ourselves as consumers, I know that doesn't resonate very well with many educators, but that we need to be touched or affected 25 to 30 times before we're willing to open our wallets and engage in a course. So if we take that idea and shift it a little bit into, say, registering in a literacy program or a GED program or a language program, maybe the person doesn't have to put any money on the table, but they do have to commit their time, which is highly valuable. So how many times does that person need to be touched, contacted, influenced, and emotionally engaged before they're willing to commit their time or their money to take part in your program? In some cases, depending on the kind of program you have, it may take that much time for them to mentally get over a barrier or make themselves vulnerable enough to try something new. So it takes a long time to reach people, is what I'm saying, and don't give up too soon. That's the #1 problem that we see in nonprofit, is the idea of frustration, very slow return on investment, and that it's being ineffective when really it's still in an incubation period, and the incubation period is very important and very slow. So Renata's asked there, how often would you post on Facebook? It depends a little bit on how many people you have in your Facebook. For example, if you've only got 5 people, maybe posting every day would be a bit exhausting for them. And I think once a week at least. It depends on your levels of engagement. Possibly twice a week could be helpful. There are tools out there now. I use them, for example, for my blog and Twitter, where if I update one, there's a domino effect and the others will get updated. And I forget what the tools are, but I'll make sure that I find them for our 10th session. You're welcome. Yes, absolutely, Pam. Preparing long-range marketing plans because of the long time frame. Yes, and then going back to them and reviewing them on a regular basis and celebrating the small successes, whatever they are. Yeah, and we know that the world is shifting at a rapid pace, right? Like when I wrote this second edition of this book, it was 7 years ago. Well, the marketing principles and the foundations are still the same, but the social media has changed everything, and how we connect with one another using technology. So my point to you is, if you build a long-term marketing plan, include enough flexibility that you can tweak it as a kind of a working document, if you will, and go back and review your successes and measures. With regards to identifying your target market, can you let me know sort of where you are on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very high, if you already know who your target market is? Do you know who you're trying to reach? It's kind of helpful for me to get an idea. We can always look to, who are we serving today, and then who are we turning away, and think, well, if we had more capacity or more funding or more of this or that, then we could engage those people. Super. Okay. Pam says she knows them, but she doesn't know how to find them. Okay. Interesting. Okay. And Renata's around a 3 or 4, and a 4 as well. Okay. One of the things that can happen, particularly with a fledgling business or a fledgling program, is that the idea that, well, everybody could take our program, right? It could be, say adults from 17 to 97, and that can almost be crippling because it can create a sense of overwhelm for your program. And the idea is that the more you can bring it down and narrow it and clarify it, the more successful that it's likely to be. Okay, interesting. Okay, so a couple of you have said you're having trouble reaching your target market. That's good. It's not good that you have trouble reaching them. That's not what I mean. What it means is it gives me an idea of how I can incorporate some strategies for that into future programs. In terms of how do you narrow it down, looking at who have you actually worked with, not who do you want to work with, who has actually benefited from your programs. And that could be your demographic. So it might be something quite narrow, like 18 to 24-year-olds who are from a particular region, for example, or who have maybe you have more men than women, and using some diagnostic tools. So one of the things that I'll put together for next time is, I'll make myself a note here, diagnostic tool for current market. I'll make sure that I have something for a future program on that. And if you don't know where to specialize, it may depend a little bit on the programs that you already have, right? So with marketing, we know that we can either go broad or we can go deep. In marketing, it's called the horizontal market, a general product that appeals to everybody, and I mean everybody. So for example, toilet paper might have a horizontal market because, most people in the developed world will hopefully use toilet paper. But for example, say Kleenex with lotion, right? If you know that product, that would be a vertical market. So it's a very specialized market, and they're looking to drill down deep into a particular market. In that case, Kleenex with lotion could be targeted to individuals who have a cold right now, or children who like a gentler touch with their Kleenex. So it would be, in that case, the mothers who are buying the product. You kind of see the difference about going broad versus going deep with the marketing. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I can understand, Pam, that the high schools are reluctant to share their dropout lists because there would be all kinds of privacy rules around that. So in that case, you would want to strategize around ways of circumventing traditional ways of getting to that target market. So it could be, I'll have to think about that one a little bit more. I'll put here, make myself a note. And it's interesting that you say that, Pam, because both of my siblings, my parents were both high school dropouts. They had grade 10 education. My mom eventually went back and got her GED, but both of my two older siblings were high school dropouts and went back to school as mature students. But it was really tough for them to do it emotionally and financially and psychologically to kind of overcome those barriers. But they did it. So I completely understand where you're coming from because I have that in my own family. So I'll make myself some notes and see if I can drill down a little bit in some future programs on that. One of the interesting aspects, I guess, or misnomers about language programs can be who we're talking about when we talk about our customer or our target market, right? These are words that we can throw around with varying degrees of comfort depending on the organization that you work in. And I put here end users versus buyers. Sometimes the people who are benefiting from the program, so that would be the end user, the student, if you will, is not the person who puts the money on the table. So if you're running, say, an English program for international students, your target market is actually quite complex because you have the students who are in the program and they have an idea about what they want in terms of their experience in your program, what they want out of it. They may not be aware of the outcomes that they want, and they may be very clear on their outcomes. They may know that they want a particular TOEFL score, for example, or that they just want to meet new friends in an intensive summer holiday type program. Whereas the people footing the bill are also part of your target market, but they're not often thought of as the customer. So don't confuse the end user or the customer with the person who's putting down the money. So if it's a parent, for example, this is a good thing to look up if you don't have a very clear idea of this. Of the students that you have in your programs right now, how many of them actually put down their own money to take part in the program? If they didn't put down their own money, who put down the money for them? Was it a parent? Was it a funding organization? Was it a grandparent or somebody else that paid on their behalf? If your students are not the one paying for their own program, you actually have two markets to appeal to, whether it's a funding organization or, for example, a parent. And if it's a parent, what matters to the parent? Because that then becomes part of your target market. Sometimes people ask me about, do we need multilingual marketing materials? And my answer is, it depends who's paying the bill for the students. So if, for example, it's a parent who, you say 70% of your students are actually coming on mommy and daddy's visa, and by that I mean Visa card, MasterCard, not a travel visa, then appealing to the parent's sense of emotion is important. And what matters to the parents may not matter to the students. Parents may want to know things like their children are safe, that they can trust your program, that the teachers have high levels of credentials and a minimum of, say, a bachelor's degree. That may matter to the parents. The students may not give a hoot about those things. They may not care about safety because they're there to have fun. But parents want to know that their children are safe, particularly if they're investing a great deal of money to send them overseas. So looking at both of those as valid considerations for your marketing is important. So in terms of multilingual marketing pieces, I say, well, who are you trying to reach? If you want to do some multilingual materials for parents and the parents don't speak the target language that you're teaching, say for example you teach English as a second language, your main target market is parents in Japan, and those parents, the Japanese parents, don't speak English, it may be worth your time to do a 2-minute YouTube video in Japanese for the parents, because what you're trying to do is make that connection with them and establish the, kind of the relationship and reduce their fears, if you will. Does that make sense? And then, appealing to both as well. Okay, and what do they care about? What do they care about the most? First, if the children want to party in an intensive summer program, for example, and parents want them to be safe, well, you end up having to kind of balance and negotiate those. Yes, we let them have a good time, and at the same time, we keep them safe, and there are curfews. Maybe articulating that can help both parties understand, the responsibility that you take as a program. In terms of a marketing budget and how to set it, wow, I said 30 minutes. I'm a little bit over, but I promise we'll be under 60 today. In terms of setting your marketing budget, I have to tell you, one of the things that makes me absolutely crazy when I work with organizations who want to do marketing is that they say, okay, well, we have no marketing budget. Okay. Because often they don't. But the marketing budget that they have for brochures or business cards, what might be considered advertising and promotion, gets lumped into office supplies. Oh my goodness, this makes me absolutely crazy. If you don't have any marketing budget right now, one of the things I would encourage you to go back to would be your last 3-year financial statements for your organization and figure out what did you actually spend on what could be considered marketing, whether it was an open house, brochures, stationery for your program, communications type things like business cards. Have a look through those, work with your treasurer if you need to, or your administrative, your financial administrator, and figure out how much you actually spent on these things and use that as a starting point for a marketing budget and put that line item into your next fiscal year's budget. And it can be scary for some organizations because they say, oh, well, we don't have any of this. My guess is that even if you are working on an absolute shoestring, that you have spent some money on something related to marketing. And it can be advertising and promotions, it can be communications, public relations, it can be events in your school, such as an open house day, or if you even bought things for a potluck. And if you think, well, I'm not sure what to consider marketing, the question that could drive it would be, what have you invested in that helps you create relationships with other people? Because if you're creating those relationships with other people, particularly if they're external to your organization, part of that is a marketing effect. And if you do one thing over the next, say, 2 to 3 months, it would be to go back and do that and figure that out. If you think, okay, well, I already have a marketing line in my budget, I'm just not sure how much it should be. It depends a little bit on your organization and your financial commitments, but it is not atypical, I can tell you, from having worked with numerous language schools to see up to 20% of an overall budget for that. So again, it can be a broad understanding of marketing. 10 to 15 or 10 to 12% even is reasonable, particularly if you're on a shoestring. It depends how much flexibility you have in your budget, but I have seen up to 20%. And I've negotiated with a school. I say, okay, you have to do, if you want to do marketing and you want to be serious about it, you're going to spend one of two things. You're going to spend either your time or your money or your cash or both. Time is a more difficult thing to track because we do it through staff hours, but in terms of money, I kind of worked with one school and we got up to 8%. So those are some ideas for you. Another thing that can be really helpful is to determine how many students do you need in your courses in order to run them. And then, okay, so if we know our baseline of students, our minimum numbers to run our programs, and anything after that is gravy, we can use some of that income, becomes part of our revenue, right, for our, non-specific expenses, and you can start to allocate some of that towards marketing. It's helpful to know if you know how many students you absolutely need as a base to start your programs. If you don't know how to figure that out, one of the resources for you this week is it's a template. It's basically a formula to help you figure out how many students that you need in your courses in order to make them run at least at a baseline, right? You can't subsidize all of your programs. Maybe not all of your programs have to make money, but there are certain criteria and factors that you can consider in order to figure out what that is. And that's a great starting point for helping you understand sort of the financial position of your programs. And what that means for you. So that template is ready for you today. And then the other template that I have for you is an Excel spreadsheet that you can just take and you can fill out with your own numbers. There's some dummy numbers in there to start, but you can, and I've taken it from actually a generic sort of Excel spreadsheet, but I've adapted it specifically with criteria that I think would be important and have been important to language programs and literacy programs. And it's totally fillable in. That's not a very good word, is it? Not a very good use of language from a language professional. But you can just take it and use it and share it around your school. Okay, so those are your downloads for this week. That pretty much concludes most of the webinar that we have for today. So let me ask you, get a copy of the PowerPoint. Yes, send me an email or leave a comment on the blog. Raina, do you tweet? I'll put my Twitter address here. Okay, if you tweet, send me a private direct message with your email, and I'll email you the PowerPoints for today. I'm also, as I said, recording the program, and I'll post the recording on the blog, and be happy to connect with you on Twitter or on LinkedIn. I'll close off the recording now. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week.